Oh, we're live again. I hate it when it jumps up there and we're live all of a sudden. Hey, thank you for coming to the Professor of Perseverance. I'm Dr. James Purdue. This is the podcast. And do I have a guest for you? Yes, I have a guest for you. The guest here today has bust down the doors of barriers, not only for sports enthusiasts, but for women. I mean, she has busted the door down to be able to participate and coach in the men's arena. What is so great about that? You know, what's not great about that? Here we are, 2020, and here we are, people still busting down doors that should have been busted down 50 years ago, 60 years ago. And here we are still doing that today. So I'm just going to jump in and get started. And here we have Coach. Here you are, Coach Rachel Balkovec. Am I close?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even close.
Yep, that was actually perfect.
Oh, thank you. We appreciate you being on today. And before we get started, she has got a GoFundMe page, GoFundMe for humans during the COVID. If you can go in and support any way you can to help the GoFundMe page, it would be deeply appreciated. We'll keep running across the screen and we'll mention it again as we're going along. All right, Rachel, again, thank you for being here. Or I'm sorry, Coach, thank you for being here. We got I'm in the South. I'm not exactly sure where you're originated from, but we got some people that will go, not Coach, they'll say, hey, Coach.
So, yeah, or ma'am, probably. I mean, I'm from Nebraska, but I spent a lot of time at LSU in the South and just been in the South for quite some time. So either Coach or ma'am usually, but Rachel's just fine.
Do you when someone goes, one of your players, and they come up and say, hey, ma'am, can I? And you say, have you gone like this? I'm not a ma'am, like the military, I'm not a sir, I'm your sergeant, so you go, have you ever gone like, I'm not a ma'am, you better call me Coach. No.
I mean, at first, the first time I ever experienced that, it's kind of funny you said that because I did say that. I was like, why are you calling me ma'am? I'm not your mom. Just call me Coach or Rachel. But I wasn't used to the Southern culture. And then that was in Gulf Breeze near Pensacola, my first internship. And then I went to LSU and I just kind of understood that it was a respect thing. And I mean, I've been in so many cultures now. It's like the Latin players call me Raquel, and I answered that. And so I just, whatever anyone is comfortable with, that's what they're comfortable with. So I just answer to a lot of things.
Yeah, I would be going, Coach ma'am.
Yeah.
So all right. Hey, since you mentioned LSU, you think Old Burrow is number one? Could be tonight. Yeah. You think he's number one tonight?
I don't know. I mean, I hope so, I guess, but I'm a LSU fan, kind of just loyalty wise, but I'm happy for him no matter what happens. So
I'm sure he's going to be happy no matter what happens, because either way, whether he's first or fifth or 10th, he's going to make some money. So he's proven he's well worth the investment right now.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
Right. All right, Rachel, we don't want to go all the way back to when you were born, but let's go back to your playing days. What were your favorite sports and when you were younger?
I mean, my parents put me in just about everything they could, time-wise. So I played soccer, basketball, softball, volleyball, did a little gymnastics, just being outside. I mean, I was a really active kid, basically from the time I was born, I'm sure. So played just about everything.
Now, well, I've got to ask this question now, because this is what you broke the doors down, is you broke it down in the Major League Baseball. So did you play baseball when you were a kid?
I did not play baseball, but I played softball my entire life.
All right. Now that we're getting somewhere. She didn't play baseball, but then she's coaching baseball at the highest level you can get to in the major leagues. So this is a good start here. So, but I could tell, and looking at your other stuff, research, I saw you were a Division I catcher. So you're very athletic, from that. And so that's awesome. Again, you can tell with my fine physique how athletic I am. So kind of lose my athleticism when I broke my neck, but oh well. I tell people I didn't break my neck; that other guy did it for me. So, so it wasn't me. All right, Rachel. So now you went through your younger years, got into college again, Division I catcher, and I say that you loved education. It looked like because you got 2 master's degree, and basically both of them were in human performance.
Yeah. So if you would have asked me, if I wanted to do 2 master's degree when I was in my undergraduate degree, I would have said you're crazy. But I just, over the years, you just accumulate experiences, and I kind of basically my first master's degree was sports administration at LSU when I was a graduate assistant strength and conditioning coach there. So I, even from a pretty young age, understood that I probably wanted to be in a higher level of athletics and wanted to be probably in the administration at some point in my life. And then this last master's degree in basically biomechanics and statistics, which is just a fancy way of saying math and science and research. So I did that degree last year in Amsterdam. So I was there for a year doing coursework and working with the Netherlands national baseball and softball team as a hitting coach. So that's last year is kind of when I transitioned from like human performance, strength and conditioning to hitting. And so I was kind of getting my feet wet with the national teams there, which are small programs, of course, but perfect for me as a kind of new hitting coach, essentially, to get my eyes on like lower level play, maybe, even though they're the highest level in the Netherlands. And so I was there for a year, and then I went to Driveline Baseball, which is a pretty well-known baseball facility in the United States. I was able to do my researching in eye tracking there for hitters, and so still kind of working on the research side of things. And then that's obviously or not obviously what led me to getting a job with the Yankees with my boss, Dylan Lawson, who was a mentor of mine with the Astros when I was there.
Also, and don't play down, even though it's a smaller venue compared to overall everything else. It's still a good starting point. We got to start somewhere, and for some people, they get to start higher than others, and some people we have to start at the bottom and work our way up and everything. Yeah. So you don't play it down. It's small. It's still a beginning point, because 2020. 2018, last year, whatever, 19, there's still people that discriminate. And as well as I do, discrimination takes place. You've learned that trying to bust the doors in. And what's sad thing is they don't consider it, the people that discriminate, they don't consider discrimination. They're just so close-minded. This way it's always been. I don't see how it's going to change. So they don't think they're wrong.
Yeah. Definitely experienced my fair share. And I guess my point in saying the Netherlands national team, it's like I went from there to coaching professional baseball. But what I will say is it was nice. And I tell this to younger people all the time, or just people in general. It's like sometimes being at the lower levels, and I'm putting that in air quotes on purpose, and maybe for listeners you can't see, I'm putting it in air quotes, the lower levels is actually, in my opinion, some of the best way to learn how to coach, because you really get to dig your hands in. And so as part of why I've always loved coaching at the minor league level and even the lower levels of the minor leagues, the Latin American players, because you really get to dig your hands in and make macro level changes, both from a physical standpoint of hitting mechanics, but also just emotionally and seeing them grow as people. So people often ask me oh, would you want to be at the major league level? And I'm like, well, I mean, maybe that will be a stop in my journey, but I love coaching lower levels. And so any high school coaches out there, middle school coach, man, you're the real MVP. I think working with the lower level players is something that really teaches you as a coach, and it's a phenomenal learning experience. So I'm glad that I was able to start in the Netherlands and kind of just, like I said, getting my feet wet and looking at swings that maybe need a lot of help, and also working with players that need a lot of help from an emotional standpoint. So, I mean, that was just really my point in saying that is I was able to dive in with players that are not playing at the professional level, which is a great place to start. So, and then just to touch on something small too, where I had already worked in professional baseball with these athletes, or this level of athletes in strength and conditioning, and also some of the higher level professional baseball players that are either in the big leagues or close to being in the big leagues. So when crossing over to hitting, I knew that I wanted to kind of take a step back. I had learned the hitting, philosophy inside and out from the Astros, like from a theory standpoint. But in order to apply that, I kind of was able to, like I said, take a step back, work with the Netherlands, junior national teams, softball and baseball, and kind of work with athletes and get a chance to apply some of those, things that I knew in theory in an actual setting. So that was a long tangent, but going back to your other question of like taking it a little bit further back and talking about some of the things that I faced when I first got into the industry, because getting a hitting coach job actually, ironically, paradoxically, probably was much easier than when I first got in and I was getting a job in strength and conditioning. When I first got into the game, it was 2012. That was my first ever internship with the St. Louis Cardinals. And it was a tough go when I first got in, because even now I just love seeing how much growth there has been since that time. So 2012, that was about 8 years ago. To see how much exponential growth has happened for women in sports in general at that time is really awesome. But specifically in baseball, I mean, when I was an intern in 2012, there were 0 on-field coaches. There was a handful of athletic trainers that were working, and for listeners to understand the difference between athletic training and strength and conditioning, that are working on, okay, somebody gets injured, they come to the training room, ankle taping, different massage techniques, etc. So there was a handful of female athletic trainers, maybe 3 to 5. There were 0 strength coaches, 0 field coaches. So really cool to see how much growth has happened over the past 8 years. There's a handful of strength coaches. There are probably close to 10 athletic trainers, and now myself and 3 other women will be in uniform this year as on-field coaches. So pretty cool. But to your back to your first, I just talked for quite a while. Back to your first question.
You're doing great. You're doing awesome.
Definitely experienced some pretty blatant discrimination when I was first getting in to be a strength and conditioning coach at first. And, it's people aren't used to it. You've never seen it before. And so I think many organizations just couldn't see how they couldn't look into the future and see how that could work or even benefit an organization. So I try to have some empathy towards that situation. But obviously when I was going through it, it was pretty difficult.
Well, I would think that when they can't vision what's going on, it's because baseball and softball, even though they're very similar, are very, very different in the way you swing the bat, the way you throw the ball. I mean, there's a lot of similarities, but there's a lot of differences. And I can see them going, well, she's a girl, played college. She dominated college. Great Division I player, but it's not baseball. And so I can understand that part with the men, but I just don't understand in today's time being closed-minded. When I first started doing things, when I first got hurt, people would go, well, you can't do that. But why can't I do that? So because no one thought about it, no one pushed the barriers to make a change.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I think that this is not specific to baseball or to sports. This is just change in general. This is somebody wanting to do something different, wanting to go, wait, why can't I do that? Because softball and baseball, they're different games in some ways, but to be honest with you, the swing is actually very similar. If not, for me personally, I would teach a softball swing almost exactly the same, unless you're talking about slapping or, hitting for there are some things there, but if you're trying to hit for power, you're basically going to use a lot of the same things because the body acts the same way. If you want to hit the ball hard, just because your body is on a softball field or a baseball field, or by the way, just because your body is in the weight room, it doesn't move differently. Biomechanics are biomechanics. They're basically, it's principles of physics in some ways. And so that doesn't change if your body is, in a different setting. So there's a lot of similarities there. And I think there are way more similarities than there are differences in softball movements. Maybe the game of softball is a little different. It's a little faster, obviously a smaller field. The ball is coming from a little bit of a different area, but the same principles apply to pretty much any body anywhere. So I think that was something that is probably a lesser concern. I think that people are pretty aware that the game of softball and baseball are similar in a lot of ways, and I have the arm pain to prove it. So I have similar arm pain, and like even catching is like very similar concepts. So I think people understand that. What they were more, like you said, like you referenced, what they were more afraid of is, well, women can't coach men, and I think it's like, wait, why? Have we tried this? And so if people have never tried it before, they can't really envision it. And so if they can't envision it, then it's a scary thing to take the leap and take again, air quotes, chance on hiring a woman, because they've never seen it done before ever. And maybe if they have seen it done, there's been some problems, whether that's players hitting on the person, or, a woman coming into an environment where there's a lot of cursing going on and spitting and, dirt. And I obviously, or again, maybe not obviously, but for me personally, I was cussing and spitting when I was an athlete in high school and college. So I think a lot of times people are worried about saying, oh, are we going to offend this young lady? And it's like, no, I'm actually probably worried about offending you more than you should be worried about offending me.
That's when you start having a cussing out session to see who can do the best.
I think I probably would give some people a run for their money. So
there you go. Hey, the speeding part you're talking about, I remember when I first went to college, and I was in college for 2 full weeks when I had my injury, and it was again on baseball scholarship. But I remember meeting this girl. She played on the softball team there, and some guys come up to me and made a comment about this girl was dipping, and I was going, what? And of course, I've always heard about grandmothers, dipping snuff or something when I was growing up, and I was going, what? And so I went over to that girl and I go like, yeah, I said, someone says something like you chewing tobacco, dipping or something. And she goes, does this lip look like it dips? And she pulled it down, and you see these canker sores and stuff, from her tobacco being there too long and stuff. And I'm going, huh. So
yeah, I don't dip, but what I'll say is, like, I mean, the thing that I identify with probably the most out of any, identity that I have, which I would say like 2 strong identities are being a coach and being an athlete. And I've never stopped being an athlete, not from the time that I was young to right now. I still train hard. I sweat, I lift heavy weight, I run, I have the aches and pains, the joints. I have tried to continue learning new things in athletics. So learning different movements, whether that's, I kind of picked up beach volleyball several years ago and just being coached. So like the mental side of being overwhelmed emotionally, having to learn something new, what that feels like. And so I really relate. I think externally players might, or coaches might look at me and go, how could she possibly relate to this? But I relate to these players probably more so than anyone would ever believe. And so it's, from a physical external standpoint, obviously you see my hair's down, I got earrings in, and, I definitely have that feminine side to me, or traditionally feminine, I guess you could say. But I also definitely have the athletic, the down and dirty, the masculine side. We all have a feminine and masculine side. And so those pieces are pretty, like, both very strong for me, which I think is rare. And so I get, going back to discrimination is really just a fear of change. And I think that just like in your situation, people will go, well, you can't try to do that. And they're afraid for your safety. They're afraid for what that means for them, because they could have been wrong in the past, and they could have told someone in the past, no, you can never walk again. You're not going to be able to move from the neck down, or whatever they told you. And that's a fear from fearing to allow you to try because of what might happen, but also fearing, wow, I could have been wrong, that actually he can do this, which means I've told other people in the past they couldn't do it, and they actually could do it. So they've limited people in the past. And same thing with me. Oh no, a woman can't do that. She'll never be respected. Da, da, da. How many women before me got told that and just quit or did something else? Whereas thankfully the St. Louis Cardinals hired me full-time as an intern in 2012, full-time in 2014. And by the way, they hired me into a management position overseeing the entire minor league system with 250 athletes, 10 male strength coaches I was overseeing. So they really said, yep, not only do we think she can do it, but we think she can lead others to do it. So they allowed me that opportunity, which then allowed me hopefully to set up the stage for other organizations to see, oh, maybe a woman can do it. And damn, we've told a lot of women before that they couldn't do it, which means we were wrong, or we were wrong to not at least give them an opportunity to show us that we're wrong. So there's a lot of things that work there, but like I said, discrimination is really just a fear of change for many reasons.
That's the big thing, is the opportunity. All right. To decide right or wrong, you don't know unless the opportunity presents itself, and then people know who's right or wrong. And then from there. Now, I got into coaching after I got injured, because that was my form of therapy, coaching baseball, because I played baseball. And you had mentioned, about the get down to the minute little thing to break a swing down or something to help someone out. And I learned it, me in a wheelchair, I had to learn to break things down because I couldn't demonstrate what needs to be done. So then I'd have to break it down as far as you can to get them to demonstrate it back to me, in a level. So, and if you look closely, not to brag and break my arm, patting my back, but if you see back there, my state championship basketball, where I coached a team to win the state one year. So not to break my arm, patting my back, but from there. Now, you'd mentioned about some type of shoulder or arm soreness from you. You're going to need that Tommy John surgery anytime soon?
No, not Tommy John, but maybe thoracic outlet syndrome. so
maybe
go. Like remove my first rib. So I usually, it's not an uncommon experience for me to wake up with a numb arm or tingling in my hand. So I definitely can relate to guys on that level for sure. There's different things you can do to work on it. So I just try to do some soft tissue work under my first rib and making sure that I have good posture and I'm not leaning forward like this, so I'm not entrapping that nerve there. But yeah, not Tommy John, but maybe removing that first rib someday when I don't have to throw batting practice anymore.
There you go. Now we got Nancy online. She's asked a question here, which is going to lead up to one of my next questions here. How did you deal with discrimination, of that? And so here's what I want to bring up. And thank you, Nancy, for being here and asking the question. But here I want to come up to now. You had to jump out on a limb and say, you got to decide now, is some type of risk worth reward of what's going to happen? Because you, let's go ahead and say it, lied on your application, resume, and now you're having to determine risk versus reward. So explain that to our audience, please.
Yeah. So if I get off track, I'll get to the story where I did lie on my resume. Because lying on my resume came after some things that happened. But I mean, to go with Nancy's question,
from discrimination, all right,
yeah,
which led to making the risk decision here. All right, go ahead.
Yeah. So I knew so 2013, 2012, I had done an internship with the Cardinals, but let me just really quickly recap. Like I had a great resume for a young person, I was 25. I had worked for the St. Louis Cardinals. I had moved to the Dominican Republic and worked for a winter ball team there for 3 months. I had worked at Arizona State, LSU, and Exos. So and I was a Division I catcher. So my resume to get into baseball was really great. And so coming around, I moved to Phoenix to start a PhD in nutrition, and coming around that next season, I was going to apply for another internship in Arizona because there's 15 baseball teams based in Arizona. So I thought, I'll, apply for an opportunity there, which I was pretty naive about because the Cardinals had already hired me as an intern. So I thought, okay, well now everyone will hire me because I've already worked in professional baseball.
That's right.
So I applied for about 10 jobs and I just heard nothing back. This was like December, January, when a lot of jobs are open in the off season. And I just was pretty naive. And I thought, well, I guess I just have to work harder and get another internship and keep doing. And I started some prerequisites for a PhD and just kind of went about my way. I got a waitressing job to pay the bills. And about midway through spring training, I got a phone call from an organization. And he said, hey, one of our guys quit. Can you, are you still local? Are you still interested in the job? And I was like, yeah, of course. So I interviewed for the position, and he said, okay, you're the person we want to hire. I'll call you in a couple of days. We'll get the paperwork going. And I'm like, wow, this is great. Well, I never heard from him, which is weird because he basically verbally said, you have the job. I never heard from him.
Yeah.
So I just kept going about my business. And about 3 weeks later, he called me and really apologetically said that they weren't going to be able to hire me. And it was because of he said it was because of my gender. And he was apologetic. He was saying that, he was like, my mother's a PhD. I respect women. I want to hire you, but administration isn't going to let me do it. And I wanted to be honest with you because I want you to know what you're up against. Well, that was a risk for him because that's illegal. So,
oh yeah.
But I just, I was actually really grateful because he was honest. And so I at least knew why I wasn't getting, even though I had this great resume, I knew why I wasn't getting the job. And so then he actually said, like, on top of that the reason why it took him so long to get back to me is because he had reached out to all the other teams that he knew had open jobs. And they all said the same thing, that they had received my resume because I applied for every open job, and that it was a great resume, but they just weren't in the position to hire a woman at that time. So I was pretty naive prior to that phone call. And then I was not naive at all after that phone call. So I knew what I was up against. And so I guess going back to Nancy's question directly, and I've really been called lately to start programs to help women get through these things because I think it's a pretty unique situation. And it's also something that's not talked about, So the two things that I think I have been able to unpack in reflecting on these experiences over a long period of time are, first of all, having purpose, and clinging to that purpose, because it's really easy to quit on yourself. But when you know you have a purpose of externally helping someone else, it's really hard to quit, because it's not just you that you're giving up on a whole lot of other people. That's number one. And number two, I think, would just be, how did I combat that discrimination? I knew that I had to be better than everyone else, and you have to be okay with that. And so, I mean, I know that you can also relate to this. Like, people are going to look at you and think, well, he can't be a coach, or he can't do this, or he can't do that. And you have to be better than maybe other candidates. And you honestly have to be okay with that, because you have to be empathetic. Obviously, there are not a lot of people that have any kind of paralysis that are out there coaching and really improving young people's lives. And so it's very hard for people to conceptualize that. So you have to be better than everyone else to really, get people to look at you seriously. So anyway, going back to the first one I want to talk about is purpose. And I just really early on, I had to dig down and go, why am I doing this? Like, what, obviously I wanted to coach and I love sports and I want to help people, but those are all like really basic baseline things that you have to be a coach. Like, everyone wants to help people, but I had to have a much deeper why. And I think very early on, I started to realize, as I was having conversations with people, and during that year, I was getting calls for interviews for collegiate positions, which were all with women's sports, by the way, no male sports. And I just was like, wait, again, I was so naive, and my naivete went down to level 0. I was like, okay, I know what's going on here and I don't like this. And if I want to change it, then I'm going to have to stick around. And more importantly, what I started to realize very early on is, like, someone else, some woman out there before me applied for these jobs or thought to apply and just quit. Like, she couldn't do it. She couldn't handle it. She didn't get the waitressing job and just pay her bills and keep applying. She just took a job doing something else, whether that was coaching women's sports or getting into insurance or getting out of the coaching field entirely. And I just felt really early on that it was my job in my life to have the perseverance and have the resilience to keep going, so that at some point I could set an example for other people. And you're seeing me live out that right now. But I knew that really early, even when I was getting discriminated against and I was waitressing and picking up people's dirty dishes, I knew that I was like, nope, I have to do this because somebody else out there quit, and I'm not going to be the one to quit, because I know I can handle it. And I know that I can emotionally handle it. I know that I have the resilience to keep climbing and adding internships and getting better. So having that external purpose and knowing that you're doing it for someone else, whether that's that could be your teammates or your team that you're coaching, or that could be all women everywhere. It doesn't matter who. It's just having that, wanting to give back essentially to a community of people that need it. And then just, having to be better and not being bitter about that. Like I'm glad that I was discriminated against, because I've had to work harder than other people, which has made me better. And I look around and I'm like, wow, you didn't have to do 7 unpaid internships. Like, wow, I'm so thankful that I did all of those unpaid internships, because it gave me such a rich, I think, robust and well-rounded perspective, because I had to do so many of those internships that I got to observe and see all of these different cultures and different organizations and how things were done. And that's made me better as a coach and as a professional. So I think no one likes to get done with their undergrad or graduate degree and go, okay, now I have to do 7 internships before I'm going to do a full-time position. And no one intentionally takes that path. But I'm glad that I was kind of forced, again, air quotes, forced, because I wasn't forced to do any of that. But I'm glad that my path took me down that road, because it made me better. So again, all the way back to Nancy's question, how did I deal with discrimination, is really unpacking and taking a deep dive into my purpose, which is something that I'm actively coaching professionals on and women on right now. And then also just stacking on extra experiences and making myself better, and importantly, not being upset about that. Being an underdog is a blessing, and it's a superpower. Being an underdog is a superpower, because once you're through that, if you make it through being that underdog and you get to some level of success, you're going to be bulletproof because of your experiences of having to prove yourself.
I like the underdog analogy you used there, because it also teaches you, you learn, if you really want something, how bad do you want it, and what would you take those 7 internships to be able to make it through the long run. And so much you have learned through all that is great from there. So, all right, now here, let's get to this now. Explain to everybody who Ray is when they would call. So Ray,
and by the way, like, this whole experience led to me creating a course for professional development called the Virtual Handshake Academy, because my resume had to be so good, and also just the presentation of my resume and my cover letter. And when I sent things out, I really had to wow people. So again, I'm thankful that I went through all this, but my resume, so I actually lied on my resume. And after the year of sitting out of baseball, I just was so sure that I was going to be discriminated against that I actually changed my name on my resume from Rachel to Ray, spelled R-A-E. And so it was pretty short-lived because it got awkward really fast, but I sent my resume out that next off season with Ray on the resume, and I got responses immediately. And I was taken aback, and I just was like, wow, I was like, wow, it's working. And it was another kind of, like I said, when I got that phone call and they told me, hey, we're discriminating against you, it was kind of a relief, because I thought, okay, like, it's working. My resume is, people like my resume. What I'm doing is paying off. It's just really not in the way that I would like it to, but at least I am getting attention from my resume and I'm doing the right thing. So I got a bunch of responses. And then one day I was with my friends and I got a phone call from a number I didn't know. And I answered, and he said, can I speak to Ray? And I just was like, oh my gosh, it worked. So I was able to get on the phone with this guy. But unfortunately I was out and about with my friends. So I was like, hey, yeah, I'm interested. I'd really like to talk. Can we talk tomorrow? He said, yeah, I'll call you back tomorrow. And I never heard from him. And then I followed up, I called him, I emailed.
Tomorrow never got here.
Yeah. So like I said, it was a pretty short-lived alter ego. But again, it just was a wake-up call to go, okay, good. Like, my resume is good and people are noticing it and I'm doing the right things, but it's just my gender. Just my gender, not a big deal. It was just, people asked me, like, why didn't you quit? I had those like little instances of hope, ironically, through being discriminated against and just knowing that I was, okay, it's my gender, I'm being discriminated against. It's not what I'm doing. So I knew I was good enough, and I knew that I could coach at that level. But it was just going to take someone to take a chance. And honestly, that it got pretty late in that off season. It was January when I got a phone call from the St. Louis Cardinals saying they were interested in hiring me back full time. So I would have probably had to sit out another year if it wasn't for the Cardinals, who had already they hired me because they saw my work as an intern. So that's why they were willing to consider me for a full-time position. So I mean, I was just they get all the praise, the Cardinals organization, for hiring me full-time in that role, for sure.
Well, they definitely, when you're talking about being discriminated, you felt it was good for you because now you're learning everything you've been working toward has been right. It's just your gender. And I've told people where they want to believe it or not, they may think I'm lying. Breaking my neck, being paralyzed was a blessing to me. Of course, I wanted to be a professional baseball player, but less than 1% ever make it there. So the odds are dramatically against me. But that's what my dream was. And so, but if it wouldn't have happened, who knows? I may have been underneath the river bridge, wrapped up in a cardboard box, wondering where my next meal was coming from. Who knows? But at least after being paralyzed and going through everything I've been through, I got to say it's been a pretty good life. It could have been worse, but it didn't. So, Rachel, down here at the bottom. Then before I get to going to Rachel here, GoFundMe. Go to Rachel's GoFundMe, Humans for Humans during COVID, and donate. Do what you can. Do what you can and help out here. So, Rachel, let's finish up here because I know you got another appointment and everything. What advice can you give? And I don't want to say just for women, it's overall for anyone that if they're wanting to be a trendsetter like you, what advice could you give them?
Yeah, I would say, two things I'm touching on lately, and one of them I've already talked about, but empathy is something I haven't really talked about, and that's something I wasn't really great at when I first got in, but I would always just think like, what's wrong with these people? But just remember, if you're going to try to do something different, that means you're creating change for people, and no one likes change. I mean, I don't like change. You don't like change. It's hard for people. Everyone wants to stay in homeostasis. They want to stay the same because that's easy, right? They don't have to think differently or create new processes or do something different for themselves. So I think have empathy for that. And in my personal situation, I like to tell women, imagine you're a mom and you got 3 boys and you go into the bathroom one day and the toilet seat is up. Well, does that mean that your sons hate you or they don't want you to be there or they're discriminating against you? No, they just forgot, so sometimes for me, I'm like, okay, there's an awkward situation that comes up or someone forgets about me or just, and I'm just like, I just have to be empathetic and it's just different, so if you're trying to do something different, you have to understand that people are not going to immediately accept that. And they might even just not like it. And that's okay. The only way to do that, the only way to beat that is to be excellent. And so I think it's a quote from Oprah, and I'm going to butcher this quote, but she says, the best solution for sexism or racism is excellence. And so you've got to be better and you should embrace that, as we've already talked about. So the first one is just being empathetic and understanding that change is hard for everyone. And then I think the other thing that I've already mentioned and that I've started coaching people on is really unpacking your purpose. And the stronger your purpose is, the easier it's going to be when things get tough, because you're going to go, God, why am I doing this? This is so hard. No one else has to do this. Sometimes I get tired. I don't want to do it. But just if you have a purpose, then it's really hard to give up. And if you are aware of what community you're serving and you think about those people that are relying on you, it's really hard to give up because it's not just about you. It's about other people.
That's it. If you're able to serve to help mankind to better itself in the long run, that's a great purpose from there. So to me, I would like to add one more thing, that if you want to be a trendsetter, you want to break that glass ceiling, you want to kick the door off the hinges, you want to go through full force, but you can't be afraid to put your time in. And again, like you said earlier, it may be more time and more learning, more effort than the person that's probably just as qualified, but because I can't do the air quotes, you have to do that for me, but you're different. You have to put in your time, and it may take more energy than what you expect.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
So, all right, I want to. Oh, thank you for being here. Oh, this has been awesome here again. Having a big trendsetter, someone busting down the doors. This is awesome. My program is overcoming adversity, not necessarily a disability. It's just someone that's gone through some challenge and is really tore it up. And again, going to help out other women in the future. And not only that, but help life in general to be better and everything. Again, Rachel, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. I mean, I admire you, and I think I relate to, just like you just said, it's not just about a woman being in a professional sports. It's about any underdog, or anytime I see somebody doing something different, or, pushing the boundaries or overcoming something, I definitely relate to them. So I appreciate you having me on.
You're welcome. And everybody else, if you go back and hear this replay on the replay, thank you for doing here. Be sure to like and subscribe. Also, leave a comment of some sort from there. Thank everybody for being here. Nancy, thank you for coming in today and giving your question and everything. Thank you for supporting. Everybody else, do something today, tomorrow, something next week that's going to help you persevere past your paralysis.